Chapter 3. I was hungry and high as I neared Edison Court. The Skagit flat plain out by Edison was a flat, open area without many trees, typical for this part of the state. It felt exposed. The bright spot in the clouds where the sun was hiding told me that I had a couple more hours of daylight ahead of me. A leather-clad man on a motorcycle had pulled out ahead of me as I approached. One of the bikers that had Mac's people so nervous, I supposed. The Harley he rode was functional, if not pretty. Too much matte black, not enough chrome. The pipes had been cut short to make as much noise as possible, serving no purpose that I could see other than to announce to strangers what an asshole the rider was. I kept driving past the entrance to the trailer park as the biker pulled out so that he wouldn't see me pulling in. I drove behind him for a short time and got a good look at the patch on his black leather jacket before he opened the throttle and pulled away and out of view. Los Perdidos, the top rocker proclaimed in yellow and the deep yellow-gray that human eyes would probably see as red, above a picture of a smiling skull with a shushing skeletal finger placed vertically against its bony mouth. Los Perdidos? The lost ones, the lost boys, reached through the warm fog of my medicated brain for the translation. One advantage of living a long time is that you have the opportunity to pick up a lot of things, like languages. In my time, I've learned about a half-dozen languages. I only speak them incomprehensibly, but I can usually understand a fair bit more than people expect. I pulled off at the next country road and circled back around to the trailer park from the other direction once the rider was long gone. Edison Court was the kind of place that trailer trash ended up after the unemployment benefits ran out, and where junkies moved once they were tired of even pretending to want to get clean. I fit right in. Paint peeled from 2 rows of rusted metal boxes that sat on cluttered little muddy lots, where tufts of untrimmed grass stuck defiantly out of the slush. A twisted metal swing set stood between 2 of the homes, a neglected plastic tricycle and a few abandoned pieces of children's clothing lay discarded on the frozen mud. It made me angry to think of children being raised in that place. But angry was the last thing that I needed to be if I was going to keep this thing from turning bloody. I killed the ignition on the Blazer and scratched Blue behind her ear. She raised her head for a moment to see where we were and quickly reached the conclusion that there was nothing much to look at. She licked my fingers twice, curled back up on the passenger seat beside me, and half closed her eyes. Now what? I didn't have an address, a picture, or even a scent. Just a name to go with a yellow trailer, but there were 3 goddamn yellow trailers. Hell, to my color-blind eyes, almost half of them seemed some shade of yellow. Maybe I should have heard Mac out for a second after all, but I'd just been too damn startled by the phone call and my hackles had been up. I looked around at a few of the trailers, looking for anything that might give me a place to start. A broken window covered in plywood, another that had burned out Christmas lights gathering cobwebs, a couple of run-down trucks were the only vehicles in residence. The place looked nearly abandoned. No motorcycles. That might be a good thing, unless this faceless Andy had ridden away on one. Any kids were still at school, and any resident with an unlikely job was away at it now. It was a good time of day for this sort of thing, less chance of complications. A figure caught my attention out of the corner of my eye. Looking more closely, I saw that the lone pedestrian was another ghost. This one, an apparition of a middle-aged woman, was walking around and occasionally stopping to put her hands to her mouth, as if to amplify her voice as she called out. She appeared to be looking for somebody, a missing dog or child, perhaps, that she would never find. Most specters are like that, endlessly running through the same futile actions. They single-mindedly carry out some compulsion based on the deep-rooted obsessions that consumed their dying thoughts. If they were left alone, they usually wouldn't take notice of anything else. Usually. People like me, Garot, are an exception. We see the ghosts when others can't, with growing clarity as the moon waxes full, but we are also more noticeable to them in turn. I could feel the hairs on my arms and legs prickle as she stared at me, trying to puzzle out what was different about me. I kept my eyes forward while Blue nuzzled my leg. After busying myself rolling and sparking another cigarette, the spectral seeker finally lost interest and continued her search for whatever. Ghosts like that aren't uncommon in my experience. I was just glad that there weren't more at hand. I had more mundane worries to occupy me. How the hell was I going to find this kid? I had no idea what I was looking for. As I didn't even have a scent to try and follow, my eyes and nose were of no particular use. That left my ears. I rolled the window half down and closed my eyes, the better to not see any more ghosts for the time being. I listened. The first things I heard were closest to me. The rise and fall of Blue's breathing on the seat beside me, the grumbling of my own stomach, the clicking of my cooling engine. Nothing helpful there. I tuned those out and concentrated, hearing the distant roar of the ocean in one direction and the steady hum of the interstate highway in the other, miles off. I pulled in, focusing on the couple of 100 feet around me in every direction. In one trailer I heard snoring. In another, I heard a young child crying in a way that made it sound like it was beginning to realize there was no point. Nobody was listening. How old was this Andy kid supposed to be, anyway? Mac knew better than to expect me to change diapers. Again, I wish I'd taken the time to get more detail before smashing my phone. I kept listening. I heard a television, people chanting a name again and again. Jerry? Then I heard a phone ring from the trailer with the crying and ignored child, and a woman's voice answered it quickly. I could hear her speaking in hushed tones, then a door opening and closing before she continued in a bathroom or closet. I could almost make out what she was saying. Almost, but not quite. I strained but couldn't bring the words into focus. Everything was too fuzzy. Drugging the beast in my head in order to avoid tearing somebody apart was a practical necessity, but the downside was that the more dormant the wolf was within me, the less I could draw on the abilities that came with it. Put plainly, I was having trouble performing. It happens. As I saw it, I had two options. First, the cautious approach. I could take my sweet time out here looking for leads or going door to door until I found something, but that would take time that I wasn't willing to spend. Or second, the expedient choice. I could rattle the cage a little bit and see if I could wake up the wolf just enough to let me get this done and trust that I could keep the lid on things once I had his attention. Since I didn't want to be out here any longer than I had to, and because, as far as I knew, a pack of bikers could show up at any moment, I chose expediency. I took my impatience and anxiety at the situation, along with a bit of the sadness I'd had thinking about my sister, and tossed in a bit of the reflexive rage I'd felt when I'd been jolted awake by Mac's call the day before. I held on tight to these feelings and fed a trickle. Just a few drops, really, into the part of my mind where I kept my inner monster. The results were immediate. A ripple of adrenaline surged through my body, sharpening my senses and clenching my limbs as well as my jaw. With the alertness and tension came a wave of predatory instinct, the urge to find something to stalk, to chase, to rip and tear. I clamped down tight on the emotions I'd been feeding to my wolf, cutting it off. Too much of that, and the thing I kept locked down could burst out of the chains and bars that I imagined held it in place. It would take the driver's seat entirely. I'd be the one locked in the back of my mind, barely aware of what I was doing as the wolf ran wild. I'd be stuck there, a prisoner in my own body until the wolf spirit that shared it had either exhausted itself or I managed to wrest control. Considering how close I was to a full moon, could well be a day or two until I managed to regain full dominance. If I hadn't been drugged to the gills, I wouldn't have tried drawing on the wolf, but then I wouldn't have had such a hard time focusing in the first place. As it was, I nearly lost control, but the warm opium days that the pills had brought with them helped me lull the beast back to a rest once I had what I needed. "That bitch out of my house now!" hissed a woman's voice. I could almost make out the reply by the male voice on the other end of the phone, but not quite. I could draw on the wolf again, but after how precarious my control had been the first time, there was no way. "No, Rudy, not today," she said. "Now! I'm kicking her ass out. I don't give a damn what Lodi says." She was silent for a moment as the voice on the phone adopted that tone that some men like to use with upset women, somewhere between placating and patronizing. "You think I don't know why you keep her here? I know you guys have been passing her around. Well, I ain't gonna babysit your fuck toy for you anymore. I already told her to pack her bag. I've got a baby to take care of." Suddenly she's Mother of the Year, I thought to myself sarcastically. Was the baby even hers? No way was Andy a small child. Babies don't post bail. I was looking for a teenager. She listened to the phone for a minute before responding in a calmer, conspiratorial tone. "Yeah?" she said. "How much?" "Damn, that's a lot of money." "Okay, yeah, I won't let her leave." "Yeah, probably better I don't know." She listened again. "You know, baby, if I let her shoot up first, it would make things a lot easier," she offered. A pleased male voice on the other end gave approval in words I couldn't quite hear. "Damn right I'm smart. That's why you love me. Just be careful, baby. I don't want you going to prison for this shit." He responded in sinister whispers. "Yeah, you do what you gotta do to get patched in. Just make sure nobody finds her. I love you too, baby. See you soon. Hurry." Did I hear what I thought I'd heard? Were they going to kill some lady? Sure sounded like it. Damn. Not my business. But I couldn't just ignore it either, could I? The decent thing to do would be to tip off the police, let them handle it. After all, I was here for a kid, not to get between a gang of bikers and some floozy. But I'd developed a habit of not talking to the police a long time ago, and habits that old are damn hard to break. I got out of the car. "Stay," I whispered to Blue. She sat up attentively, but didn't move. I continued to listen closely as I made my way to the yellowish trailer with the neglected baby and jealous woman. Who else was in there? "I'm sorry, Rita. I'm ready to go. Can I just use the phone? I'll get a ride," a new voice said. Rita. Wasn't that the name of Max Snitch? I supposed this might be my business after all. "No, there's been a change of plan," Rita said. "You can stay. Rudy will be back to pick you up in a little while." "Pick me up? Where am I going?" "Hey, I'm going to cook up some of that good shit the guys left. You want some?" Rita asked. There was a pause before the other voice responded skeptically. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Clever girl, I thought as I stalked up the stairs of the trailer's flimsy front porch. "I feel bad for before," Rita said. "I know how it is with these guys sometimes. What happened isn't your fault. I want to make up for what a bitch I was to you before." I flicked the butt of my cigarette into the nearby bushes and knocked on the door. Quick and hard. The sudden noise startled the two inside, judging by their quick intakes of breath. "That was quick," Rita said, confused. I didn't hear a bike. Smarter than Rita. "Who's there?" Rita called through the door. "Max sent me," I said. What the hell? I may as well try honesty. She was supposed to be working with Mac after all. "Shit!" I heard Rita hissed under her breath, no doubt thinking nobody could hear her. "I don't know who you're talking about. Fuck off!" So much for the best policy. "Just open the door," I said, massaging the growing ache from my temple with my left hand. "Please," I added as an afterthought. No point in being rude. "Andy, get the fuck to the bedroom and hide in the closet," Rita hissed in a voice that mistakenly assumed I wouldn't be able to hear through the door. I heard hesitant footsteps obey her. Andy? Well, shit, what's in a name? It didn't occur to me that Andy could be a girl. Kids these days. "Hold on!" Rita yelled theatrically. "Jesus!" Rita was tall for a woman. She cracked the door and exposed an angular face with shadowy brown Latin eyes and excessively painted full lips. Her dark hair had honey-colored streaks and was still settling around her shoulders. I guessed that she had just let her hair down moments before answering the door, in preparation to use her most familiar weapon, her looks, against the stranger who had come knocking. A quick, involuntary glance at her impressively exposed bosom and my uncomfortably tight jeans left little to my imagination and seemed to support that guess. Rita did a passably fair job of pretending to be confused by my arrival, looking lost in the woods. She even went so far as to quickly look me up and down and give me a coy, flirtatious smile, implying that she liked what she saw. I looked like shit, and she was full of it. "What do you want?" she asked. "Mac sent me," I repeated. "Who?" she said. I rubbed my temple again and grimaced. Why did people have to make things harder than they had to be? "Listen, Rita," I said. Her brows lifted when I said her name. "Cut the crap. I'm taking Andy." "She's not here," Rita lied. "Right," I said. "That's somebody else hiding in your bedroom closet." "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Have it your way," I said, and shouldered my way through the door. "Hey!" I ignored her protests and walked toward the only door in the back of the small trailer. The place smelled like sour garbage, wet diapers, old beer, full ashtrays, and sex. Underneath it all was the faintly sweet vinegar smell of heroin. I sniffed. Rita hadn't been lying about one thing. It was the good stuff. Suddenly she was on my back, screaming and spitting as she hit my head again and again with her small fist. The pain and surprise shot down my spine, and I had to fight to keep the anger from spilling into my wolf. I don't hurt women. It's a rule. But the wolf and I differ on these things. I'd promised myself long ago that I'd let myself die before killing another woman. That didn't mean the urge wasn't strong. I reached behind me and caught her arm, pulling her off and in front of me as she kicked and cursed me. I held her against the flimsy wall by her upper arm, trying not to bruise her. She continued to strike at me with her other arm, and she scratched at my face a couple of times, and even knocked loose my sunglasses before I caught her other arm in mine and pinned her against the wall. "Stop!" I snarled as I locked eyes with her. That was all it took. Having drawn on my wolf recently, I didn't doubt that my eyes had begun to change. They're the first things that do. She saw it, the wolf in my eyes, and she reacted instantly to the dominant predator in front of her. She submitted. Completely. Instantly. A garrot's eyes can have a powerful and immediate effect on some people. Fear and panic are most common, but there were other reactions. Rita was one of those unfortunate women who had learned through painful experience to associate fear and submission with intimacy. Her skin flushed and her scent changed from anger to a disgusting combination of fear and arousal. It may have been a disgusting combination to the man that I struggled to be, but it was utterly intoxicating to the beast that I wanted to deny. I felt him, my wolf self, pressing against the bars of his cage, salivating, hungry. Yes, the thought bubbled to the forefront of my foggy mind. Take the bitch. We are dominant. It is right. She knows. I found myself staring at her, feeling the urge to pounce on her trembling body and satisfy urges I'd been denying for years. I'll admit that I was tempted. I was no monk. It wouldn't be that bad, would it? She wanted it. I could taste it on the stale air. She was taking short, shallow breaths, her large nipples drawn to sharp points beneath her tight shirt. My hand clenched that shirt. Yes. Rip. Take. From some deeply Freudian corner of my psyche came the thought of my mother, of the woman she had been and the things she had endured. I thought then of my father, of the man he had shown me I could have become, but never wanted to. An ancient childhood filled with religious sexual repression and Catholic guilt rose to the fore. I looked down at Rita, vulnerable and willing, completely at my mercy. But I saw my wife. I saw Evelyn. A flood of shame came rushing with the thought of my wife's face. I took that shame, that guilt, and poured it into the wolf. Disgust, shock, confusion. There are feelings that feed the wolf. Hunger, lust, pain, fear, anger. Most of all, anger. These are fuel for a garou. A little of them can empower us, but too much of them can bring a total loss of control, no matter what the phase of the moon may be. There are other feelings, though, feelings that are alien to the wolf. Guilt, shame, regret. A wolf doesn't understand these things, can't understand them. I drown my other self in those feelings now, utterly dousing the burning need that had been spreading and threatening to take over. I felt the wolf within me back away. He didn't retreat, but he stepped back, as if smelling something rotten, and allowed me to reassert control, for the time being. My senses dulled. Whatever was in my eyes must have dimmed as well. Rita scrambled away from me and crossed her arms in front of herself. Deciding that it would be best to be done here as soon as possible, I recovered my sunglasses and turned to push open the bedroom door. It was locked, but the wall was flimsy and split when I applied a little force. The diaper sex heroin smells were strongest here, along with a hint of something else. Something strange and familiar that I couldn't quite place. A twin bed with dirty sheets sat in a corner. A chewed and soiled crib stood beside it, holding an ugly baby, his face swollen and red from crying. He stared at me with snot covering his chin and his saturated diaper hanging nearly to his knees. Rita's eyes stared at me from his unwashed face. Babies and ghosts have a lot in common. They both want things that I don't have the time or skill to deal with, and I've found that they are best handled by pretending that they aren't there, at least in the short term. I opened the closet door. The girl huddled fearfully in the corner of the closet, partially obscured by a pair of men's boots and a few longer shirts on hangers. She looked to be about 15 years old. She was a willowy little thing, 5 foot nothing. If pounds were pennies and you guessed her weight at $1, I'd expect at least a nickel change. Fashionable holes in her loosely fitting jeans showed pale, bony knees. Under an overly large, unbuttoned flannel shirt, she wore a black t-shirt with a wacky white stick figure under the words Pearl Jam, whatever the hell that was. Her hair was artificially dark, bobbed short on one side, but long and streaked blue on the other. Her face prominently displayed a black eye and a split lip. She'd had a rough go of it lately. Her nose dominated her face and seemed a bit out of proportion with her thin lips. What stood out, even in that moment, were her eyes. Giant, blue, stormy things that glared defiant daggers at me from a bruised face, and they didn't quite match. One eye was deep blue, almost indigo. The other had a patch covering less than half of her iris, which was startlingly emerald green. Especially surprising to me, as I haven't been able to see that shade of green outside of memories and dreams since I became a Garou. It startled me to see a fleck of this lost color now. So this was Andy Morgan? She looked at me, and sort of past me with those strange eyes, like she saw something that wasn't there. A look somewhere between puzzlement and recognition came over her, and the smell of fear subsided somewhat. She seemed to have decided that she didn't need to be afraid of the strange man who had just stormed into the place where she was hiding. Maybe she wasn't as smart as I'd given her credit for earlier when I'd been eavesdropping. The smell of the girl intrigued me, but there was a more powerful scent emanating from the closet which grabbed my attention and held it in a vice. It was obvious that this closet was where they kept the dope Rita had been talking about. A small black duffel bag, the kind people take to the gym, sat on the top shelf and seemed to be the source of the aroma. Then there was the smell of the girl herself. She had a pleasant underlying smell of lavender and vanilla, but she also reeked of a smoky combination of tobacco and heroin. Under the receding wave of her diminishing fear, I caught another scent. I sniffed once to be sure. No mistake. This girl was pregnant. Also, that familiar smell that I'd barely noticed before was strongest here, coming from the girl herself, though I still couldn't define it. The closest I could come was to say that it smelled green. The smell of leaves and growing things, of buds about to blossom, of the first hint of spring pollen. It was faint, but distracting, an itch in my awareness. No time to puzzle about strange eyes and mysterious scents. We had to leave while that was still possible. "Get up," I said. She obeyed, scrambling to her feet with a mouse-like alacrity. "Who are you?" she asked, her eyes on my feet. "The guy who is taking you out of here," I said. The pregnant teenager half squeaked and half screamed as I heard Rita approach from behind me. As the first gunshot went off, Andy dropped to the ground. The kid had good instincts. The shot had missed me and punched a small hole in the thin wall with more of a crack than a bang. I spun around, keeping a tight grip on the leash in my head. Rita stood there holding a very small target pistol, a .22, I'd say. It was the sort of gun you used if you were desperate, not the sort of thing you used to put a man down, not if you were smart. But I didn't give Rita credit for being overly bright. In fact, she wasn't even pointing it at me convincingly. I heard Andy scrambling behind me to the cover of the bed and watched Rita's gun follow her. She was trying to kill the girl. I moved without thinking as Rita pulled the trigger 2 more times. I'd planned to knock the pistol away, take it from her, maybe put her on her ass again, but the final shot tore into my hip and struck bone as I reached her. Pain. I was on her. The wolf was on her. The gun was knocked across the room, forgotten. I had her on the floor, beneath me, my hands around her skull. I was roaring, filling the room with the pain and anger that flooded my senses. Yes. Yes. Kill. The pain of the little bullet grinding within me had knocked me from the driver's seat. The wolf was in control now. I could feel her pulse through the palms of my hands, just as I felt the itching in my gums and fingertips. As the change threatened to wash over me, fangs and claws ached to burst free, to tear into her, to taste her. I could push my thumbs through her temples and into her skull. It would be easy. Her fear was primal and absolute, flooding my nose, intoxicating me. I wanted to taste it, to taste the hot blood gush over my mouth as I ate her heart. It would be so good. Rita's baby wailed, and I was dimly aware of motion across the room. It drew my eye. Andy moved and covered the child with her body, not wanting to let him watch his mother get torn to wet, meaty shreds. Andy herself stared directly at me and met my gaze with her blue and emerald eyes. Something in her eyes gave me pause, sent a small shiver through me that had the effect of somebody snapping their fingers beside my ears or dousing me with a small splash of cool water. I saw her worry and fear, not for herself, but for the baby she was shielding. Children shouldn't have to see something like that. They shouldn't have to carry the memory of their mothers being attacked, being beaten in front of them. I know. No. I struggled to assert myself against the wolf. Not a woman. Never another woman. I heard myself laugh, heard the wolf laugh through my mouth, a nasty, snarling sound. Yes, it thought back to me. Meat is meat. My hands tightened on Rita's skull. I could feel more than hear the creaking of her skull as it began to give out under my strength. I could smell everything, taste everything. The panicked hammering of Rita's heart. The smell of the urine spilling from her as she squirmed uselessly. And the hushing noises that Andy made to the baby as she began, herself, to quietly sob. No, I'll kill you. I'll kill us both. This time I won't fail. God help me if I kill another woman, I will end it. I promise you. The wolf took notice. It could feel my sincerity, my self-loathing. It couldn't understand it, but it knew I meant it. Catholic upbringing be damned. If suicide was the only way not to live as a monster, I'd do it. The wolf hesitated, and in that moment I had him. I saw myself with my hands around his bestial throat, wrenching him away from the front of my mind. He snarled and snapped, but I didn't care. Let him tear me to pieces if that was what it took. I wasn't letting go. Andy and Rita only saw me sitting there, hands on Rita's head, not moving. But internally, I was throwing myself against the wolf. I kicked, I clawed, I bit. I fought like a wolf. I felt his grudging respect as I forced him back down into the depths of our mind. He would challenge me again, soon. But for now, at least, I had won dominance. I was the alpha of my own mind, for the moment. I released Rita and sat with my back against the faux wood wall, pressing my left hand to my stomach to staunch the bleeding. Rita rose with a grimace, white marks in the shape of my fingers already darkening on her forehead. She scrambled across the room to her baby. Andy gave him to her without hesitation, and Rita held the filthy, squalling boy and sobbed over him in the corner. The wolf watched through my eyes, still salivating with the thought of tearing into her. She was prey to him now. I forced some slow, deep breaths as I gathered my wits. I waited for the ache in my muscles to subside. The itching in my gums and fingertips lingered, though. Finally, I stood, painfully, and looked at Rita. She was no threat anymore. She was incoherent. She had given up completely on the thought of killing Andy or keeping her from leaving with me. The man on the phone would be angry, but Rita wasn't thinking that far ahead. She was just glad to be alive. I'd seen it before. I'd felt it before. "Move," I said to Andy, my voice raw and guttural now with the lingering influence of the wolf. She moved to the door, trembling. I took a last cleansing breath in the unclean bedroom air, and a thought occurred to me. Walking to the closet, I grabbed the gym bag where I had smelled the dope. For a moment I stood there, holding it, and looked to Rita where she sat on the floor with her child, daring her to object to my taking it. She didn't.